Both of the developments were started illegally. And once you start an illegal development, you do it at your own risk.
So how is it illegal?
Because there was no DCA approval for either of them.
The two housing schemes under the UWP administration were developed with the aim of providing low-cost housing while tackling the issue of unplanned settlements.
Some liars are just really good at acting.
And I'm saying, and I'm asking everyone to watch what they eat and eat what they watch. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Wait, first of all, you're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Watch what they eat and eat what they watch.
We were born in 1964, brothers and one sister, fed by a deep faith in God and in ourselves, with a common purpose: to fight the cause for those who can't, to grow and develop our St. Lucia to meet the basic social and economic needs of our people, a job for every man and woman, decent, affordable housing, universal education, quality medical care regardless of level of income, adequate social security, especially for senior citizens and the disabled. We believe in religious freedom, democracy and the rule of law, racial and social harmony, elimination of gender discrimination and political victimization, free enterprise, cultural, social and economic progress, conservation of our environment, economic empowerment of St. Lucians and indigenous ownership of economic activity, economic empowerment of St. Lucians and indigenous ownership of economic activity, regulation of foreign investment for the development of our country. We are the party with vision. We are the party that develops. We are proud of our decades of success. We believe in ourselves. We are proud of ourselves. We are the preferred party. We are the party of choice. 2024, together we celebrate our 60th birthday. We are one family. We are the United Workers, and this is our party, the United Workers Party.
Members, the question is that be it resolved, the House of Assembly agrees to the lifting of the suspension without prejudice to the legal action by the member for Micoud South against his suspension, and be it further resolved that the lifting of the suspension shall be effective immediately following the passage of this motion, and the member will be at liberty to carry on his duties in service of the House and the constituency of Micoud South. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
On page 110, Mr. Speaker, on table 31. On the bottom of the page, which says main labor force indicators, it says source Central Statistic Office. Note, see box 1 of the CSO cautionary note on the LFS results of 2022, which advise that these estimates are not comparable to the estimates for previous years.
That's the box you just read.
No, it's not.
That's the box you just read.
No, it's not.
That's the box you just read.
But it says here, Mr. Speaker, in English, that the statistics of this year are not comparable to any other of the previous years, which is exactly. I'm going to repeat. No, it doesn't say that. I'm going to repeat it again. It says, see box 1 of the CSO's cautionary note on the LFS results for 2022.
Please allow the member to continue. The member for Castries East has yielded.
LFS results for 2022, which advises that these estimates are not comparable to the estimates for previous years. End of story, Mr. Speaker.
But box
I
one
rest my
explains
case.
it, right?
Okay, boss one. What did boss one explain?
What he just read.
Boss one explained that in the last 2 years, there's been an attempt to bring the ILO in to determine the unemployment statistics, and that there is a substantial difference in the definition of who is wanting to work versus who is working. And because of that, and because of COVID, that the results of the numbers for this year, 2022, last year, okay, are not comparable to any of the previous years.
Honourable members,
Mr. Speaker, so right now, Mr. Speaker, right now, I made a simple statement. I said that the Roseau Dam had not been completed. Very simple. 4 words. I said nothing else. Nothing else. Long story. If you ask me about the economy, I know a little bit about it. Not much, a little bit. I'll talk about it. A little. If you ask me about the economy, I know a little bit about it. Not much, a little bit. I'll talk about it. A little.
How we lose the case? How we lose the case? How we lose the case?
What is justice in the place there? That's true.
Yes, in the house. But I'm not even sure what's in other people. I know what's in. I don't think there's borrowing on people. I don't think so. Double check. There's borrowing. Which one? For what? Coveting the other part of the city below there. Yeah.
Less than 2 years into the reign of the Labour regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbour. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Fedrick to dispose of the high-value asset. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for whatever reason, the value of the lands was further reduced to $25 a square foot for sale at a mere $2.5 million. The beneficiary? The daughter of Reno Kajada.
But has a different name. So was that because she's genuinely buying the land? Is that they were just trying to avoid detection?
UWP leader Alan Chastney has raised critical questions concerning this blatant act of nepotism. What becomes of the lands when the new owners of the Castries port come in? How would the land factor into the plans for the redevelopment of the harbor to include a fishing village at Banans Bay? Would the now owners sell it off for a hefty profit? Why were the lands not kept for national development? Why not allow Invest St. Lucia or SLASPA to take ownership? According to Fedrick, SLASPA rejected an offer to purchase. But where were Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Philip Pierre, Investment Minister Ernest Dallaire, and Infrastructure Minister Stephenson King?
So you're telling me it was offered to them and neither one of them saw it fit to cause SLASPA to go ahead and buy the land? Instead, the Minister of Housing said that there was no response from SLASPA. Why wasn't the land offered to Invest? Who is the Minister of Invest Solution? Isn't it not Ernest Hilaire? Is he not the district rep for that area? You would think that after spearheading the investment by GPH to fix up Bonanza, that would be a natural expansion, area of an expansion, and that by getting Invest to buy it, give them the opportunity to make sure there was a proper development in that area? None of these people said anything.
The National Housing Corporation has become a pawn in the games that Richard plays, with a board too intimidated to challenge him. Chairman Mikey Pilgrim and Deputy Chairman John Peters have for years purported themselves to be men of integrity, but today sit idly by, aiding and abetting Richard Frederick in his deeds.
There was a property purchased at the bottom of the chaussee for $1.8 million. And the person they purchased the land from is the lawyer on the National Housing Committee. No question. Nobody sees anything wrong with this. We have no problems with it. This is not innuendo. These are facts that you can go and check for yourself. Go down to the registry.
Wake up, St. Lucia. This is just another example that Pierre is putting you worse.
In this estimate, Madam President, consultancy votes increased from $81 million last year, 2022, to $122 million this year, an increase of $41 million for consultancy. Job for the boys, girls, friends, families, everybody. So in one stroke of the pen, the Honorable Prime Minister, who's the Minister of Finance, can say, we will reduce our consultancy by $33 million because crime and security is important, and we will take that $33 million and put it towards crime and security. Is that not a fair assertion? I think it's a fair assertion, but anyway.
Budget for jazz.
People's man, who's the people's man? Who's the people's man? Who's the people's man? No, Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, 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 whoop. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, whoop, whoop.
Shas is the man with the plan. Work together hand in hand. Walk up north, walk down south. The man working all around for trouble for us to grow. Tell labor we stay home. You should know how we roll. Uncle Shas got on Papi show.
We cannot give labor our country. What is the plan there for all our way? Uncle Shas is the champion. Yellow power is #1. Tell the opposition to tap out, cause club on not backing down. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, 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 whoop. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, 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 whoop. Vote, vote, Luca vote. Vote, vote, Luca vote. Vote, vote, Luca vote. Vote, vote, Luca vote. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, 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 whoop. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Uncle Shas is the people's man. Yes, whoop, 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 whoop.
Yes, been awesome. But I'm not even sure what's in other people. I know what's in. I don't think there's boring on people. I don't think so. Double check. There's boring. Which one? For what? COVID thing. The other part of the city below there. Yeah.
What if you didn't need a lie detector? Eye contact is linked with truthfulness.
A drastic move by the National Housing Corporation has led to the termination of 2 lucrative contracts for the construction company Fresh Start.
The board took the decision that not only Shock, but both Shock and Talvin Developments,
Eye contact,
which were
eye contact,
supposedly the subject matter of an 80-20 arrangement.
Eye contact is linked with truthfulness.
How much is it costing us for that termination?
Well, put it this way.
When people are lying, they are less likely to be specific. This is a massive red flag.
Both of the developments were started illegally, And once you start on illegal development, you do it at your own risk.
So how is it illegal?
Because there was no DC approval for either of them.
The two housing schemes under the UWP administration were developed with the aim of providing low-cost housing while tackling the issue of unplanned settlements.
Some liars are just really good at acting.
And I'm saying, and I'm asking everyone to watch what they eat and eat what they watch. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Wait, first of all, you're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Watch what they eat and eat what they watch.
We were born in 1964, brothers and one sister, fed by a deep faith in God and in ourselves, with a common purpose: to fight the cause for those who can't, to grow and develop our St. Lucia to meet the basic social and economic needs of our people, a job for every man and woman, decent, affordable housing, universal education, quality medical care regardless of level of income, adequate social security, especially for senior citizens and the disabled. We believe in religious freedom, democracy and the rule of law, racial and social harmony, elimination of gender discrimination and political victimization, free enterprise, cultural, social and economic progress, conservation of our environment, economic empowerment of St. Lucians and indigenous ownership of economic activity, economic empowerment of St. Lucians and indigenous ownership of economic activity, regulation of foreign investment for the development of our country. We are the party with vision. We are the party that develops. We are proud of our decades of success. We believe in ourselves. We are proud of ourselves. We are the preferred party. We are the party of choice. 2024, together we celebrate our 60th birthday. We are one family. We are the United Workers, and this is our party, the United Workers' Party.
Members, the question is that be it resolved, the House of Assembly agrees to the lifting of the suspension without prejudice to the legal action by the member for Micoud South against his suspension, and be it further resolved that the lifting of the suspension shall be effective immediately following the passage of this motion, and the member will be at liberty to carry on his duties in service of the House and the constituency of Micoud South. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
On page 110, Mr. Speaker, on table 31. On the bottom of the page, which says main labor force indicators, it says source Central Statistic Office. Note, see box 1 of the CSO cautionary note on the LFS results of 2022, which advise that these estimates are not comparable to the estimates for previous years.
That's the box you just read.
No, it's not.
That's the box you just read.
No, it's not. Yes, but it says here, Mr. Speaker, in English, that the statistics of this year are not comparable to any other of the previous years, which is exactly. I'm going to repeat. No, it doesn't say that. I'm going to repeat it again. It says, see box 1 of the CSO's cautionary note on the LFS results for 2022.
Please allow the member to continue. The member for Castries East has yielded.
LFS results for 2022, which advises that these estimates are not comparable to the estimates for previous years. End of story, Mr. Speaker.
But Box 1 explains it, right?
Okay, Boss 1, what did Boss 1 explain?
What he just read.
Boss 1 explained that in the last 2 years, there's been an attempt to bring the ILO in to determine the unemployment statistics. And that there is a substantial difference in the definition of who is wanting to work versus who is working. And because of that, because of COVID, that the results of the numbers for this year, 2022, last year, okay, are not comparable to any of the previous years.
Honourable members,
Mr. Speaker, so right now, Mr. Speaker, right now, I made a simple statement. I said that the Roseau Dam had not been completed. Very simple. 4 words. I said nothing else. Nothing else. Well, long story. If you ask me about the economy, I know a little bit about it. Not much, a little bit. I'll talk about it. A little. If you ask me about the economy, I know a little bit about it. Not much, a little bit. I'll talk about it. A little.
How we lose the case? How we lose the case? How we lose the case?
What is justice in the place there? That's true.
Yes, but I'm not even sure what's on other people. I know what's on. I don't think there's borrowing on people. I don't think so. Double check. There's borrowing. Which one? For what? Coveting the other part of the city below there. Yeah.
Less than 2 years into the reign of the Labour regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbour. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Fedrick to dispose of the high-value asset. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for whatever reason, the value of the lands was further reduced to $25 a square foot for sale at a mere $2.5 million. The beneficiary? The daughter of Reno Kajada.
But has a different name. So was that because she's genuinely buying the land? Is that they were just trying to avoid detection?
UWP leader Alan Chastney has raised critical questions concerning this blatant act of nepotism. What becomes of the lands when the new owners of the Castries port come in? How would the land factor into the plans for the redevelopment of the harbour to include a fishing village at Banans Bay? Would the now owners sell it off for a hefty profit? Why were the lands not kept for national development? Why not allow Invest St. Lucia or SASPA to take ownership? According to Fedrick, SASPA rejected an offer to purchase. But where were Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Philip Pierre, Investment Minister Ernest Dallaire, and Infrastructure Minister Stephenson King?
So you're telling me it was offered to them and neither one of them saw it fit to cause SLASPA to go ahead and buy the land? Instead, the Minister of Housing said that there was no response from Slasper. Why wasn't the land offered to invest? Who is the Minister of Invest Solution? Isn't it not Ernest Hilaire? Is he not the district rep for that area? You would think that after spearheading the investment by GPH to fix up Bonanza, that would be a natural expansion, area of an expansion, and that by getting invested to buy it, give them the opportunity to make sure there was a proper development in that area? None of these people said anything.
The National Housing Corporation has become a pawn in the games that Richard plays, with a board too intimidated to challenge him. Chairman Mikey Pilgrim and Deputy Chairman John Peters have for years purported themselves to be men of integrity, but today sit idly by, aiding and abetting Richard Frederick in his deeds.
There was a property purchased at the bottom of the chaussee for $1.8 million. And the person they purchased the land from is the lawyer on the National Housing Committee. No question. Nobody sees anything wrong with this. We have no problems with it. This is not innuendo. These are facts that you can go and check for yourself. Go down to the registry.
Wake up, St. Lucia. This is just another example that Pierre is putting you worse.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and good morning to all of you listening to us on live stream. This morning's press conference, as you can see, we have here from the United Workers' Party, Senator Dominic Fede, who will be addressing primarily the subject of tourism, and myself, Leonard Montoute, the PRO of the party, I'll be speaking primarily on the subject of crime. We will commence with my submission, after which I will hand over to my colleague, Senator Fede, and then we will have a brief session of questions and answers. As always, I request that members of the media identify yourselves when you're asking your questions and indicate what media house you represent. So, on the issue of crime in St. Lucia, we continue to see a spiraling out of control of criminal activity in St. Lucia. And of gravest concern is the situation as it relates to homicides. Of course, we are hearing increasing incidents of housebreaking, theft, but as lives are lost, especially lives of young people in St. Lucia, we are ever more concerned about the fact that very little, if anything, is being done. Had it been such a serious issue, I would say that the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security submission would be funny, would be laughable. However, it is no joke when our country is under siege and our people, particularly our youth, are losing their lives. I have called on several occasions that something be done and that drastic action be taken, to the extent that I have requested that the Minister of National Security, who has not demonstrated that he has any answers or plans, be removed from that portfolio and replaced by someone who perhaps can do a better job. Finally, the Minister of National Security himself, the Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, has come out and finally admitted that he is clueless. He has literally thrown his hands in the air in hopeless surrender and is now calling for help, and he has indicated that he's at the mercy of the citizens of St. Lucia, which of course includes the criminals. I want to remind St. Lucia and the Prime Minister, the Minister of National Security, that way back in December 2022, the United Workers' Party, as a responsible opposition, not looking at the crime situation in isolation or deeming the crime situation to be a political issue, agreed to collaborate with the government, not just in words, but in deed. And I recall that the United Workers' Party submitted some recommendations to the Minister of National Security for consideration in the crime-fighting effort. Rather than promote that collaborative spirit and recognize that we all must come together, especially when it comes to national issues such as crime fighting, the Prime Minister instead chose to be political and partisan, and he came out and made a public statement acknowledging that we had made a submission to him of some recommendations, but that he had put it in the bin. We will not ask the Minister of National Security to go back to the bin, but recognizing the seriousness of the crisis that we face as a country, we have decided to resubmit our recommendations. Since the Prime Minister has finally accepted that he does not have the answers and he does not have a plan, we have made our submission, we have resubmitted our recommendations, and we are standing ready should he want to engage us at any level in any engagement in the crime fighting effort. I implore the Prime Minister on this occasion, please resist the temptation to be political, resist the temptation to be partisan. Do not degenerate into the normal name calling that he has become famous for. Do not get into the personal abuses that he has become known for, but instead embrace the offer that we have made and show as a leader that he is prepared to promote national unity and collaborative efforts, especially when it comes to issues of national concern. And so, I would like to inform the nation that we stand ready in the crime fighting effort, because we all are affected by the effects, the negative effects of crime, and we all will pay the price if we do not stem the tide of the high crime situation, especially the number of homicides that are taking place. Currently, we have the unenviable distinction of being in the top 5 countries of the world when it comes to murder rate. That is not where we belong. That is not where we should be. And we must spare no effort and do everything in our power as a country to reverse that situation and to put St. Lucia back in a positive light as a peace-loving paradise, especially given the fact that we thrive and depend on the tourist industry, so that people can know that when they come to St. Lucia, that not only they can enjoy St. Lucia, but they can do so safely. And so, I want to reiterate again our willingness to work towards a crime reduction effort, and we suggest very strongly that the Prime Minister on this occasion do not scrap the recommendations that we issue to him and throw it in the bin, but instead give it due consideration. Because since December last year, when we first submitted our recommendation, had it been taken seriously, I am positive that the 60 or more St. Lucians who have lost their lives, some of those lives could have been spared. And so, I just want to say to St. Lucians that you too, we all must play a part. You can play a part by de-escalating confrontational situations before it becomes violent, by reporting to the police and collaborating and cooperating with the police when you have information pertinent to crime prevention and resolution of criminal activity. We also ask that we all be our brother's keeper, and that if you observe something untoward, that you say something. We know that it can be unsafe at times, but there is the anonymous crime hotline that you can utilize without identifying yourselves. So we are asking that we all play our part, we all take a stand. And of course, now that it seems finally that the Commander-in-Chief, the Prime Minister no less, who is also responsible for national security, is prepared and has become serious about doing something about crime. And I'm pleased to see that he began by acknowledging the fact that he does not have the answers, and he is calling for assistance in getting a solution. I'm hoping that he will embrace the offers of assistance. And we, as the opposition, it is our approach, it is our fashion, it is our style to step up whenever we are called upon to deliver, to rescue, or to develop our country. And that is what we are doing on this occasion. And I want to take this opportunity to express my sincere condolences to the families of the many lives lost. It is my understanding this morning that we had another homicide following the two that took place in the Vieux Fort area. We had another homicide. I know this is not a subject of discussion anymore. St. Lucians don't even want to hear about it anymore. It has become so commonplace, and that is my fear. When the loss of life through violence, especially gun violence, gun-related violence, and other physical confrontation, whether domestic or otherwise drug-related or what have you, becomes so normal in this country that it is not even a subject for discussion anymore. We cannot become numb to the reality, the harsh reality, that we are losing a generation. We cannot become immune to the fact that that crime situation, if continued unabated, will not only put our own lives in jeopardy, because eventually it may come to our doorsteps, but it will compromise our freedom, as I've always said, as well as our economic prospects. And so it is a serious matter that has to be dealt with in a serious way. And so perhaps the Prime Minister, in taking advice, not only should he consider the recommendations that we make, but consider the call that I have been making for some time now, that he relieve himself of the portfolio of national security, because he's either unwilling, unable, or not prepared to deal with a serious matter such as national security that requires very serious and focused attention at this time. I thank you. I want to touch also on another matter that is of pertinence at this time. We are now at the end of August, on the verge of the reopening of school. Next to crime, I think the most pressing issue is the matter of high prices, cost of living. And there are none who feel it more than especially single mothers, those who have children to put into school. School is reopening in the near future, in the next few days, and mothers are called upon to provide uniforms, to provide school books, to provide transportation, and all the necessities to ensure that their children return to school. This is normally a traumatic time for single mothers especially. Unfortunately, when the United Workers' Party was in office, we had devised an approach that would make life easier for parents, that is, to provide children with e-books, which itself came with downloaded textbooks, the license for which would be paid by government, and so the parents would not have to worry would not have to study the expense of textbooks. Those of you who have had children, especially at secondary school level, will know that it is not uncommon to find that one textbook can cost over $100. I shudder to think of how some of those parents could manage, especially those with more than one child, how they manage to provide uniforms, to provide those expensive textbooks, and at the same time to provide meals and, in some cases, transportation for those children to go to school. I call on the government to show conscience, to show consideration, and have a heart, especially for the poor, and reverse some of the measures that they have instated that makes life more difficult, especially for poor people. We are calling on the government to look into providing greater assistance to single mothers and poor parents in assisting them in providing for the children who have to return to school very soon. And we ask that though it was an idea conceived by the United Workers' Party, a good idea is a good idea. Once it redounds to the benefit of the people, it should not be scrapped on account of political considerations. So we ask that they reconsider the implementation of the e-books so that that can in itself provide some ease for the parents. I will stop at this juncture and I will invite my colleague, Senator Dominic Fedee, the Deputy Political Leader of the United Workers' Party, to address you on yet another important issue of pertinence to all of us in St. Lucia, the issue of tourism. And I lament the fact that unfortunately we have an administration headed by a former Minister of Tourism who does not appreciate and understand the relevance and importance of tourism as an industry to St. Lucia. But I'm hoping after this submission here this morning and after some reconsideration, greater appreciation and understanding will be had for this all-important industry. And again, I am pledging the United Workers' Party's support. Given our track record with tourism, I'm pledging our support in assisting in ensuring that our #1 industry remains afloat so that St. Lucians can continue to be gainfully employed and that they can deal with the high cost of living that confront us, especially those of us who are unemployed. Senator Fedee, I hand over to you.
Thank you. Well, a pleasant good morning to members of the media, members of the press. Special good morning to listeners on Facebook, the listeners in the diaspora. A special good morning to you as well. And I want to say a special good morning to my colleague, Leonard Spider-Montoot, who continues to do a stellar job as the Public Relations Officer of the United Workers' Party. It doesn't give me great joy to tell you what I'm about to tell you today, but figures released by the St. Lucia Tourism Authority spells trouble and disaster for the local tourism sector. This is despite efforts by local tourism experts that suggest all is well within the tourism industry. We see them scampering for positives as though they are looking for an oasis in a desert of failure. The simple truth is this: the tourism sector, when compared to pre-COVID-19 levels, is almost 100,000 visitors below where we should be, according to the reports released by the St. Lucia Tourism Authority for the month of July. So, if I look at the month of July, for example, in the year 2019, we would have been somewhere about 788,000 visitors. The month of July year to date, January to July, total visitors stand at 696,000. So you see we have a difference of almost 100,000 visitors less than where we were in the pre-COVID-19 levels. Now these are not just numbers. These are numbers that have a severe implication on the ordinary lives of the people of St. Lucia. And my colleague referenced the inflation crisis, which we are trying to grapple with. And tourism workers are having a significantly hard time dealing with this inflation crisis as our local tourism officials continue to mismanage this important sector. Stayover arrivals, year to date, June, 12% down. Stayover arrivals, year to date, July, 20% down. 1/5 of where it should have been in 2019. Stayover arrivals, year to date, July versus year to date, 2019 is actually 28,000 visitors less than where we were at the time. So in the year 2019, we had 28,000 visitors more than where we were. So the tourism officials need to stop giving the reports in snippets and give the people of St. Lucia a full picture of what's taking place in the industry. With almost 100,000 visitors down, we have a significantly long way to go before we can catch up with the full recovery of our destination. The numbers for July 2023 versus July 2019, the US market recorded a 34% decline. 34. The UK market, a 20% decline. How are any of these numbers suggesting that there is any success within the tourism sector? This is a complete failure by the administration. This is an absolute disaster that the country has to deal with as it seeks to move forward and improve and overcome the many economic and social challenges which we confront. I continue with more numbers from the St. Lucia Tourism Authority. July 2023, all markets 20% down, less than all markets for the month of July in the year 2019. That's the hotel guess I've just shared with you. Now I want to move on to cruise ships. Cruise ship arrivals have been less than impressive, with the 2019 figures or the pre-COVID figures showing that we had, by this time from January to July, 484,631 cruise passengers. Today, we are recording 50,000 less than where we were at 343,000 cruise passengers. This, Mr. Minister, is not success. This is failure. When you've got these high numbers of regression, these high numbers of failure, you are failing quite a number of people. There was 0 cruise ship arrivals in the month of June, 0 cruise ship arrivals in the month of July. The minister or the tourism officials are yet to give the taxi drivers, they're yet to give the vendors, they're yet to give the duty-free employees at Point Serafin or La Place Carénage, they're yet to give other people who are depending on the cruise sector, the day boat charters, the small boat guys, the tour companies, the tour guides who haven't got a job right now, no income coming in with very high prices in the supermarkets. But yet the minister goes around and he tells people that he's doing a good job. Well, the United Workers' Party categorically disagrees, because the numbers show that this administration has completely failed the people in the area of the tourism sector. And so I feel very, very sorry for beach facilities all over the country. I feel very, very sorry for the many St. Lucians who have gone ahead and invested monies really with the expectation that they are going to get good arrival numbers. The minister has squandered a great opportunity that the United Workers' Party has left for this administration. So thousands of hotel workers are home because of what? Low occupancies. They're on rotation. Some of them don't have a job because their hotels have been closed for renovation. And you know, not every time when a hotel announces that it's closed for renovation means that that hotel is necessarily closing for genuine renovation. It could mean that the hotel is doing badly and it decides to make an announcement, and they would actually lose a lot more money closing than remaining open with very poor occupancy levels. So it is very, very difficult. I'm sorry for a number of those St. Lucians who own Airbnbs, who have been encouraged to invest that with the premise that the industry is going to do well. The yachting sector is also on the precipice of disaster. We have year to date in 2019, we would have had 41,519 visitors coming via yachts in the tourism sector. The St. Lucia Tourism Authority, in their latest report for July, suggests that there are only 27,277 yacht arrivals to our destination. So we see that there's 14,000 less. This is a significant number. This is 33% less than where we were in 2019. No explanation from the SLTA, no explanation from the ministry as to why the yachting sector is down. No strategy, no announcement of a plan as to how we are going to work towards getting back a third of the business that we have lost in the yachting sector. People are sailing, people are going to other destinations. Why is St. Lucia doing so badly across all of the components of the tourism industry? So when we look at the cruise, bad news. We look at the hotel guests, bad news. We look at the yachts, bad news. This is a sector that has failed. This is a sector that's not doing well. Could it be the crime situation that we've had? Could it be the lack of marketing and the lack of foresight? Could it be incompetence on the part of the government? Could it be complacency? Because when this government came in, we left a whole lot of airlift for this administration. And those numbers gave them a sense of false security because they didn't understand what we were doing. And as a result, and failing to manage the airlift situation of the country, we have lost flights. We've said that it's regrettable that we have lost the flight from Chicago. Why is it important that we had a flight with American Airlines flying out of Chicago? It is important because if American Airlines is flying and you've also got United, you've got multiple carriers on the route. And it meant that you would have had competition on the Chicago route. So airfares, instead of being $1,750 today, it could have been below 1,000 because of the competition that the United Workers' Party instilled in the Chicago route or the gateway, so that visitors have more choices, visitors have more frequency, and visitors have a better price to arrive at the destination. We've lost the flight from Dallas, Texas. Texas is a very important destination. For a long time, the government of St. Lucia and tourism planners have been trying to get an airline to fly out of Texas. And during COVID, the United Workers' Party administration went to American Airlines with a plan. And we said, look, we are going to be among one of the first destinations in the Caribbean to reopen. We look at the tarmac, and while everyone saw that COVID presented a problem and a crisis, the United Workers' Party certainly saw this crisis as a good thing not to waste. And what we did is, we said, let's be proactive. Let's go out and let's get airlines to come in. Let's give them a set of protocols that our Ministry of Health was comfortable with to start the reopening of our tourism industry. It yielded significant benefits, and one of those benefits was actually a flight from Dallas, Texas. And why is Texas important as a market to fly out of? Because Texas is a year-round destination. So while other parts of the US, you see that peak travel to warm destinations like the Caribbean would be in the winter months only, in Texas, because of the heat waves that they would traditionally have in the summer months, this provided a very great opportunity for the tourism sector to have year-round business, to end the traditional problem we have of seasonality. And so it's regrettable that we haven't used that opportunity to build on the Texas market to get people to come to St. Lucia on a year-round basis. All of the Airbnbs that are struggling now, all of the small guest houses and inns and villas, all of the smaller hotels that are indigenously owned, that are struggling because the regional airlift is down, are now in a state of collapse because this government has squandered a great opportunity that we have left for it. The same thing has happened in JFK. For 27 years, there was no flight from American Airlines coming out of JFK. And why was that important? JetBlue is the only flight that comes, and we have a carrier with a monopoly on the route. When you have one carrier, one choice, a monopoly, what do you think is going to happen to the prices? So when I see the minister being so puzzled about higher fares to St. Lucia, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to reduce the price of airfares to St. Lucia so that we can improve the competitiveness of our destination? The same thing with putting JetBlue in New Jersey, which was part of the strategy, is to make sure that we had competition, to make sure that people had choices, to make sure that people had options, to make sure that people had a competitive airfare upon which to come to St. Lucia. I submit this to you, members of the media today, that because of this management of our airlift sector, we are seeing the difficulty now. We are struggling. Other destinations are getting airlift. I see announcements being made all the time that new flights are going into Barbados, new flights are going into Aruba, new flights are going into Jamaica. You just go to Carib Journal and you see every airline, every destination has been ahead of the game. This is a piecemeal, last-minute government that all they care about is Jazz and Carnival. Jazz and Carnival cannot save the industry. We have said so before. There are 52 weeks in a year. What are you going to do? What's the strategy to grow demand, to grow occupancy levels, to grow capacity for the other 50 weeks in the year? No plan this administration has when it comes to the management of tourism. And so now time has caught up with them. Because instead of going to meet the officials in the traditional marketplace, the marketplaces of the UK and the US, we've heard about more trips to Dubai and Nigeria, places that have no importance at all to do with our tourism sector, to do with our economic survival, our sustainability. I looked at the report. I haven't seen any arrivals from Dubai or from Nigeria. Why is the minister so caught up with Dubai and Nigeria? There are no flights. Manage your bread and butter business. Get that done. And when you would have established yourself in your main markets, then you can think of expansion. But we're thinking of expansion while we are 20% down in our main markets, while we are almost 100,000 visitors overall. When you combine the yachts, the cruise, and the hotel stays on the island. This is absolutely regrettable. And this is not letting the minister down. This is letting down the ordinary folks of St. Lucia. And my colleague referenced the price of gas has gone up. The price of cooking gas, the price of bread, the price of general household food in the society. I'm so sorry for the hotel employees that are on rotation. No mention is made of these individuals. No mention is made of the farmer who has just lost his market because we're busy announcing that there's a Hyatt development coming to St. Lucia. That's not new. That's been there for a long time. This government has failed us as it relates to the establishment of new hotels within the country. And you know the joke about it is that I hear them attempt to undermine the amazing track record which Alan Shastney has in the tourism sector and as a tourism official. Alan Shastney has worked in some of the leading tourism companies in the Caribbean. One of the biggest airlines at the time, Air Jamaica. He has worked with Chris Blackwell with Island Outpost in a group of boutique hotels. He has been director of tourism. The SLP administration had so much confidence in Alan Shastney as a tourism official that he was the tourism expert on the World Cup committee when they were instituting the World Cup. So because he's a UWP politician now, you're going to try to tarnish the man's reputation? Listen, I put Minister Rambali, I put Philip J. Pierre, I put Ernest Hilaire, I put all of them together, and they are not 5% of what Alan Shastney can do for tourism. There is nobody in this country, and I'm proud to say that while I was a young minister of tourism, one of the reasons why I was so successful is because I had a prime minister who understood the industry. My God, I can't imagine working under Philip J. Pierre. Philip J. Pierre, while he was Minister of Tourism, told American Airlines that he wasn't going to pay them the marketing support that they asked for. He allowed American Airlines to go, and then what? He said that Caribbean Airlines would pick up the slack. Now, how ridiculous is that? I don't mean anything about Caribbean Airlines, but I'm just showing you a man who says that he never understood the importance of tourism until COVID happened. Could you imagine being a tourism minister under a leader like that? It would be a disaster. You would go home with stress levels sky high to the roof because he doesn't know what he's doing. And instead of getting the right advice, they come on the media and they speak such foolishness about tourism. They speak about all the little myopic things. What has happened to community tourism? We left it as village tourism. Okay? Have you heard anything recently? This was a sector, this was a program by the United Workers' Party. And what we wanted to do was to give the people of St. Lucia entrepreneurial opportunities. We wanted the people of St. Lucia to have stronger ownership within the industry. It was a program that I was very passionate about. It was a program that the former Prime Minister Alan Shastney was passionate about. And so what we were trying to do was to say, look, gone are the days when you have a big investor come to St. Lucia and he can get incentives because he can afford to establish a big hotel. Now, there are so many St. Lucians that are in the tourism accommodation business, and if we could make it easier by reducing the incentives, it would be a lot more easy whether you have 6 rooms or not, that by getting into the incentives from the government, it would be that much easier. We built infrastructure. Look at what has happened in places like Soufriere and Anse-Lorraine, in my own constituency where I previously served. You see that we've established a mini hotel. We've established a restaurant. We've put those facilities because we understand that tourism is a capital-intensive business, right? And by tourism being so capital-intensive, by putting infrastructure, those infrastructure could be leased out to small tourism business people. So if you want to run a small inn, the United Workers' Party government had begun the process of making it possible that you can can lease to purchase your own boutique hotel, that you can become a restaurateur without having to find all of the capital costs that sometimes can be a burden for the development of such tourism facilities. We established as well credit, and you would remember very well that the former Minister of Finance and former Prime Minister Alan Shastney signed an agreement with the CARICOM Development Fund, and that was 10 million Eastern Caribbean dollars, and the monies were placed at the Development Bank on loan to small tourism businesses. We left that. So we left an incentive regime, we left a credit facility, we left a policy of developing infrastructure, and the other important pillar was this management agency that was going to give management and technical support to several small Airbnbs, small restaurateurs, small vendors, small attraction owners. And this was what village tourism was supposed to have done, was to help people to get into the tourism business, to own the tourism business, to become entrepreneurs, to dominate this sector. And what has this administration done? The only thing they have done is change the name from village tourism to community tourism. But that's typical for SLP. Typical St. Lucia Labour Party administration. The same they have done with universal secondary education. They gave us the impression like they built so many schools. And with universal healthcare, they gave the impression like they're doing so much in healthcare. So they are a government that come up with fancy names but zero substance. And that's the thing. And that's the essence of this administration. That's why we have a crime problem. Because they come up with fancy names. They're going to do, instead of calling the increase on the citizens' VAT, they call it a levy for health and security. You're not fooling anybody with that. We're all on to you. There's no coincidence that the levy, which we believe is ill-conceived, that it is not coincidental that it is 2.5, which is the same rate that the former Prime Minister Alan Shastney, while he was trying to reduce the VAT rate on the citizens, because he saw that VAT was oppressive to the poor people of this country, that it caused the price of goods to go sky high. And when he reduced it, they criticized him. And so for them, they have to be right about their political arguments. And this is why we're in such a mess today. No management on crime, no management on inflation, no management on anything in this country. And they have grossly mismanaged the crucial tourism industry, which continued playing a pivotal role in the recovery of the economy of St. Lucia. And this is regrettable. And we are very concerned to see that these numbers are down. When you look at the amount of people coming through the airport, it's a lot less than we have had traditionally. A lot less. I'm tired of hearing about more discussions at the heads of government level about regional air travel. It's been a complete disaster. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Tourism need to take the bull by the horn and to ensure that they go and do something tangible to resolve this problem. I put this back squarely on their shoulders. Don't hide behind the regional institutions. And yes, and I hear them now trying to justify the mismanaged situation with Liat. I'm so glad that the taxpayers of St. Lucia never had to do what the taxpayers of Barbados and Antigua and St. Vincent has had to do. And the prime ministers of Barbados and St. Vincent, they have made it clear and they have said, look, we have had enough of putting money into this. We have no more money to put into this failing institution that we call Liat. Now, I don't mean to brandish the organization, but we have to face it like it is. It was badly run. It was a necessary service, badly run. And so now, what's the plan? What's the plan, Mr. Prime Minister and Mr. Minister? What are you going to do? How are you going to get this industry going? We are in trouble in this country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Fede. And we'll move straight away into the questions and answers. If you have any questions for either Senator Fede or myself, please indicate and identify yourself and proceed with your questions. Well, we submitted the recommendations to the Prime Minister, and there were a number of areas that were recommended that he should look at. And if I can just quickly go through the resubmitted letter that was sent to the Prime Minister, I think we have some 9 areas that we made recommendations about, and I can just quickly run through them for your benefit and the benefit of listeners. First of all, we suggested the establishment of a crime command center. Now, this crime command center, for those of you who followed what happened and how we went about handling the COVID-19 crisis, we had set up a command center that presided over everything to do with COVID-19, and that command center met on a daily basis and made decisions as we went along in terms of how we would not only manage the epidemic, but also looking at ways that in which we could have resumed economic activities without compromising lives in St. Lucia. I think this crisis that we are facing, the Prime Minister, surprisingly himself, described the crime situation as a pandemic. It's not quite a pandemic, because a pandemic is global and it is, throughout, at least throughout the region, which is not true. There are countries that does not experience the kind of crime wave that we are experiencing here in St. Lucia, but it's certainly an epidemic. And so we can describe it as that at least. And so we are saying that if we set up a command center with a dedicated focus toward finding solutions, discussing the situation as we move along, and coming up with answers, I think that will go a long way in assisting in the crime fighting effort. We also suggested strengthening personnel and resources. I mean, that goes, that's self-explanatory in terms of staffing and so on, not only for the police force, but for the command center and any other agency that is involved in crime fighting. Border control enhancement. That is something we had begun some serious work on. And you might ask yourself, what does border control have to do with the crime situation that we are experiencing? Well, the guns that are predominantly used as the weapon of choice for committing homicide come in through our borders primarily. And so if we have, a strong border control unit in place, we can, deter not just the drugs and the guns and so on coming into our country through our borders. We recommended the introduction of a crime equivalent to NEMAC. Now, NEMAC is our National Emergency Management Committee. Whenever we face a disaster, be it hurricane or what have you, NEMAC is activated. And so you have representatives from various sectors in the country, not only government, who come together to look at this crisis that we are facing, the situation that we are dealing with, and to spring into action to remedy the situation. We are saying the crime situation is sufficiently grave, it's sufficiently serious that we have such an organization put in place to look at the crime situation. Number 5, ensuring integrity within law enforcement. Now, again, you may wonder, what does that have to do with crime fighting? If you have a crime fighting unit, that unit must be focused on crime fighting. There cannot be infighting while you're looking at fighting crime. There must be the authority, the legitimacy, and integrity within the organization itself, not only to ensure that you get the best of its members, but to ensure that you get the cooperation of the society. Today, what do we have? Police force, which is our premier crime fighting agency, embroiled in all kinds of allegations and accusations at the top. That in itself is a major distraction that we do not need at a time when we want full focus, full attention on the real issue, which is the crime situation. We also have a recommendation for enhancing our maritime security. I mean, we hear the talk constantly that our borders are porous. We have so many coves and beaches in St. Lucia that people can come in via sea vessels at different places. But if we strengthen our maritime forces, we can secure our entry points better and minimize not only the weapons that come in to cause crime, but even the movement of criminals as well. And we recommended expediting technological implementation, that is to say, accelerating the key location entry database, and taking a more serious look at the closed circuit television, the CCTV installation around the island that will assist police greatly, not only in solving crime, but it will also serve as a deterrent to crime. Incentivizing information sharing. If we can have incentives for the public, for example, to provide the police with information, and even the criminals themselves to provide information, I think it will go a long way in assisting the police in cracking some of the cases, in being one step ahead of some of the activities, the criminal activities, and at the same time, making a dent in crime fighting and prevention. And finally, we have here addressing legal backlog, and that would have to do with the legal system, the courts. We know that it is not uncommon for a case to be languishing for years before it is heard in court, and there is that common overused saying, but is still true, that justice delayed is justice denied, and it must be seen that we are acting swiftly in dealing with the perpetrators of crime, and that those onlookers can see a direct nexus between the actions of the criminal and the penalties that they have to face, and that they can make the association so that in itself will serve as a deterrent. Yeah. I think these are sound recommendations that have been made, and we stand ready to discuss them in detail and to even make further suggestions to the Prime Minister. And you would have thought that would be embraced, given the fact that there is nine more suggestions, 9 more plans than the Prime Minister himself had.
Yeah. If I can just add my voice to that, the recommendation of the command center is crucial. And I remember I was the chairman of the COVID command center, and one of the things that technocrats and civil servants remarked to me was how this framework allowed for there to be the cross-agency exchange that is very often absent in government. Government is such a big monster sometimes that if you don't manage it well, what's going to happen is its various components and various parts are going to operate in silos, because you've got departments that are focused on their own goals, their own targets, and what you have to do is to ensure that you prioritize a crisis that's happening within the country, and you harness the very best potential from the civil service to ensure that you're leading this every step of the way, that agencies are talking to each other. There's proper cross communication. The police alone by itself cannot solve crime, cannot solve the criminal elements. And so, as my colleague has mentioned, you would see that there are implications for customs, there are implications for the Ministry of Transport, there are implications for the Ministry of Agriculture. There are implications for the cabinet. There are implications for everyone. And so every single day, while we were dealing with COVID, and one of the reasons we were so successful at managing it is because we brought together all the players, all the leaders that we needed to take decisions in a very quick time. And so by having those discussions and making sure that the synergies were established, I think it helped our success. So that's a very important suggestion, which could help the crime situation.
I heard a lot of talk about citizens needing to come in and giving information to the police. You yourself will inform persons who have knowledge of criminal activity if they see something to say something. But the question on everybody's mind is the backlash after you say what you see. I heard a lot of recommendations, sound recommendations for, you made a recommendation for incentivizing information. But what about public safety? What about witness protection? Because we know, and we've seen in the past, that a lot of cases cannot move forward because witnesses who've come forward are later targeted by criminals. We've seen this happen. We hear the stories of people calling the police to give information on stolen goods or whatever, and the police coming and bringing, I think I heard something where the police brought somebody to the criminal and said, is this the person you saw? Or, I mean, you hear these stories out there. What recommendations are there, or will we see recommendations that will ensure public safety when persons in the communities that see a crime say?
Well, we are not oblivious to the pitfalls and the dangers of being a witness, and we are not suggesting for a moment that it's not real. But when we talk about incentivizing information sharing, we're not solely talking about rewarding people for giving information, but we're also talking about setting up the requisite protection measures, institutions, and so on, to, like, for example, witness protection, like you mentioned, and ensuring that there is, some repercussion for policemen who go rogue and jeopardize members of the public in that manner. But at the same time, we can also make use of, for example, that there's this anonymous crime hotline can be utilized. If you know personally someone in the crime fighting organization that you can trust, you go to that person directly. And things of that nature. And we would be certainly, when we sit with the government, making tangible suggestions as to how we can, in recognition of the dangers and the pitfalls, make recommendations how we can circumvent them and avoid further danger to the public, because already the crime situation is creating an unsafe environment. We do not want to further jeopardize ourselves in our effort to fight the crime. So that's a legitimate concern, but of course that is one that has to be taken into consideration. And I just want to add that it is not enough. We recognize that as the United Workers' Party, as an opposition, we recognize that it is not enough to say that we are not police officers. It is not enough to say that we are not investigators, but we must all put our collective intellect, energy, and effort in finding ways to combat this situation, because it is of concern. Even when you're not directly affected by the crime, you are indirectly affected, whether it be through your safety, indirectly, your freedom, the economy. I mean, like my colleague spoke extensively on tourism. Tourism is an industry that can easily be jeopardized by high incidence of crime. And so, the Prime Minister keeps reiterating that he's not a police officer. We are not asking that he be a police officer. We are not asking that he carry out any investigations. We are saying, as the head of the ministry, the government agency responsible for security and safety in this country, that he put measures in place, that he does what it takes, he provides the necessary resources to ensure that we have an answer, if not to eliminate crime, but at least to significantly reduce the incidence of crime in St. Lucia.
You spoke about providing greater assistance for poor parents, especially when it comes to education for our youth. What are some of the things that you would recommend?
Well, I mean, I know that the government has instituted a STEP program, and usually it is timed with certain periods, like the reopening of school. That is a step in the right direction. I mean, that's something we did while we were in office. We didn't call it STEP, we call it stimulus, and we did that on a regular basis. That is one measure. But I personally believe that where necessary, we provide social programs, but the best assistance you can provide to any individual in terms of assisting them and aiding them in moving forward is to provide gainful employment. And that is where we focus greatly, so that people can become independent. They do not have to depend on politicians. They do not have to, feel that their pride and their dignity, is being affected in any way, and that they can, have the pride in themselves that they can provide for themselves and their family. I think that is where growing the economy will go a long way in ensuring that people have employment and the people who are employed can provide for themselves. That is the number one consideration. However, there may always be in society those who require assistance, that government, increase the assistance that is put in place, because we had assistance coming through parliamentary representatives, we had assistance coming through SSDF, we had assistance coming through Ministry of Education, plus we had the stimulus programs going on. So I would like to see a more robust social program in place, given the fact that at the moment there is very little being done by way of employment.
Mr. Senator Fede, you've spoken extensively on tourism arrivals not being back to the pre-COVID levels. But given the current situation that we are faced with, we're seeing on the international front countries advising their citizens not to come to St. Lucia because of our high crime situation.
There you go.
How would you, as a former tourism minister, counteract that kind of issue, that problem?
Well, look, there are several studies to substantiate your claim, and that is tourism and crime are not a very good mix. And wherever there are high levels of crime, there will be trepidation on the part of would-be travelers to go to a certain destination. The reputation of that destination is very, very important. And, I am very disappointed by efforts by the current government to not be transparent, when they mention they didn't want the name of a certain business to be named in public or in media reports. That is an admission by them that they too agree with what I'm saying. It's common knowledge. One has to go to the heart of the problem. There's no need to sweep issues under the carpet. We have a crisis in our country. We have a crime situation that is unprecedented. People are feeling anxious. And if we are feeling anxious, just imagine people who don't know our terrain in St. Lucia, how more anxious they will feel about some of the news. These days, when something is reported on any of our TV stations, it's all online. And so anyone Googling St. Lucia news, I'm sure the crime is going to pop up and dominate. So we've got so much at risk that we've got to make sure that we nip this in the bud. This is not about politics. We are here, and I don't think we are very happy. In my private conversations with my colleague, we live in this country. We're first and foremost citizens of the country before we're politicians. And so we would like the government to succeed at crime. But unfortunately, they're not. And we have to call it like it is, because there are many people who are afraid to talk about what's happening. There are many people who feel that they'll be victimized, who feel that their businesses will be starved, who feel that they'll be squeezed, who feel that their careers will be hampered, or their civil society groups might not receive support for funding from the government. So there are all kinds of considerations as to why people are not coming out to speak as they should. But this is something that has gripped everyone. Certainly, if you do a poll in St. Lucia, I'm sure that crime is going to come up as one of the leading concerns of our citizens. Such is the anxiety, such is the anguish, such is the agony. And, it's a personal matter. This has become a humanitarian disaster when we look at mothers who are crying for sons. I can't imagine burying one of my children. I never ever want to face that reality of having to get the news that, one of my sons are no longer with me. That will be a very, very painful thing. And so all of us have an important stake in this, because this is crucial. And then there are several mothers who are still waiting for justice, as referenced by the backlog of cases mentioned by my colleague. So there's no closure yet. So we need to go to the heart of the problem. A whole list of the recommendations that we have submitted here today are crucial for the dealing of this situation, so that we can bring back St. Lucia, we can rescue the country, we can give people a semblance. There will always be crime, but what we don't accept is that crime has to be at these unprecedented levels. This has just reached too far, and I think that enough is enough, and we've got to do something. It's time for action.
There has been talk of in fact, there has been action by some of the leading members of the private sector saying that it's time we get involved, and there's a group called the Citizens for Peace and Prosperity. They've been doing a lot of work.
Social work
to combat crime. And they make up representatives from a huge cross-section of the business community. Do you believe that it is time the tourism sector takes a more active approach with regards to solving the crime problem? Do you think it's time that hotels and Airbnbs and all those other companies start to invest in law enforcement, for example, maybe provide the police with added support, or do stuff that will enhance our crime fighting mechanism?
I think the fact that there is this Center for Citizens for Peace and Justice set up by an amalgamation of private sector groups is an indication of the lack of confidence they have in this administration and their ability to manage the crime situation. It has gone out of control simply. And, when you hear the person charged with this responsibility putting his hands in the air and saying, well, my father was the police, not me, and saying things like, well, there's a regional pandemic, you're passing the buck. Leadership is not about buck passing. Leadership is about arresting the situation, taking responsibility, and say, look, we've got a long way to go. And we want to see a certain attitude from the leaders of our country, at least those that are at the helm of governing the country, to fix this crisis. This is a humanitarian disaster. We are in trouble in this country. And so for me, the responsibility of managing crime is on the shoulders of the government. the government has to do it. What I would like to see is that the private sector applies a lot more pressure than it is on the government and make it absolutely clear that, look, they're not going to tolerate this. I mean, how many more businesses do they want to be robbed? How many more bad reports in tourism destinations does the tourism sector want to see? I am sometimes very confused as to why, for example, tourism officials are so quiet about this whole matter. I have never seen this in the history of this country before. Whenever there was a president of a hotels association, or certainly an executive director, in all my days, I mean, I worked in media just like you for a little bit. And, you know, going back as far as Noel Kadas and people like Bowen, and they didn't play with governments as it relates to the safety and the reputational damage that crime can cause to the destination. So what we've got to do is not to give the government the impression that everything is okay, or not to give the government the impression that we are satisfied. No, we've got to now say to the government, look, we want to help you solve this problem, yes, but we have got a responsibility to our members to ensure that we represent their concerns, their fears, their trepidation. I mean, when you have invested millions, like some of our local hoteliers have, I can think of many local hotel owners. I can think of people who have Airbnb. And you see that this crime situation is gripping the country in the manner that it is. You must be nervous about your investment. You must be concerned. And what you would want is that collective representation, that voice to say to the government, look, my members are not satisfied. There are many hoteliers that are not happy with the crime problem. I can tell you, they speak to me all the time. They're not happy with the level of representation they receive from the Hotels Association. I say that with no fear from anyone. And that is, I'm not attacking the Hotels Association, but we have got to make sure all of us play our part. There's no more hiding behind the wall. We've got to come out and we've got to accept we've got a disaster on our hands.
Okay, well, at this juncture, I think we've come to the end of our question and answer session. I would like to thank you, the members of the media who showed up here this morning to carry this press conference, and I would like to thank all of those who are listening to us on live stream, and we ask that you join us again next week when we will be addressing another pertinent national issue. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Less than 2 years into the reign of the Leaver regime, St. Lucia's patrimony is not only under threat by Philip Pierre's bad policies, but is being recklessly sold to friends, family, and foreigners. The latest act of detaching St. Lucia from her most prized lands came with the sale of the Banand lands along the Castries Harbor. The lands were owned by the National Housing Corporation. In 2013, the 2.5 acres was valued at about $70 a square foot for a total cost value of $7 million, proving to be a valuable asset for the state. However, in December of 2021, a decision was taken by Housing Minister Richard Frederick to dispose of the high-value asset. Former SLP Senator and prospective candidate Terence Skinny Sinclair was hired to undertake the property valuation. His report assessed the market value at $3.5 million. That's half of what the lands were going for 10 years ago. Prime waterfront property enclosing one of the most scenic ports in the Caribbean, with thriving commercial and tourism activity. And for whatever reason, The value of the lands was further reduced to $25 a square foot for sale at a mere $2.5 million. The beneficiary? The daughter of Reno Kajada.
But has a different name. So was that because she's genuinely buying the land? Is that they were just trying to avoid detection?
UWP leader Alan Chastney has raised critical questions concerning this blatant act of nepotism. What becomes of the lands when the new owners of the Castries port come in? How would the land factor into the plans for the redevelopment of the harbor to include a fishing village at Banans Bay? Would the now owners sell it off for a hefty profit? Why were the lands not kept for national development? Why not allow Invest St. Lucia or SASPA to take ownership? According to Thedrick, SASPA rejected an offer to purchase. But where were Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Philip Pierre, Investment Minister Ernest Delaire, and Infrastructure Minister Stevenson King?
So you're telling me it was offered to them and neither one of them saw it fit to cause SLASPA to go ahead and buy the land? Instead, the Minister of Housing said that there was no response from SLASPA. Why wasn't the land offered to Invest? Who is the Minister of Invest Solution? Isn't it not Ernest Hilaire? Is he not the district rep for that area? You would think that after spearheading the investment by GPH to fix up Banans, that would be a natural expansion, area of an expansion, and that by getting Invest to buy it, give them the opportunity to make sure there was a proper development in that area? None of these people said anything.
The National Housing Corporation has become a pawn in the games that Richard plays, with a board too intimidated to challenge him. Chairman Mikey Pilgrim and Deputy Chairman John Peters have for years purported themselves to be men of integrity, but today sit idly by, aiding and abetting Richard Thedrick in his deeds.
There was a property purchased at the bottom of the chaussee for $1.8 million. And the person they purchased the land from is the lawyer on the National Housing Committee. No question. Nobody sees anything wrong with this. We have no problems with it. This is not innuendo. These are facts that you can go and check for yourself. Go down to the registry.
Wake up, St. Lucia. This is just another example that Pierre is putting you worse.